All right, let's jump right in. When you picture India, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most people, it's the sheer number of people, right? It's the most populous country on the entire planet. But have you ever really stopped and asked why? Like, really why? Because the answer, well, it's way more incredible than you'd ever guess. Yeah, that's the big question we're tackling today. How on earth did one single country end up home to nearly 1.5 billion people? We're going to peel back all the usual explanations, and I'm telling you, the real answer has been staring us in the face the whole time.
I mean, just let this sink in for a second. You've got 18% of all human beings living on just 2% of the world's land. That's insane when you think about it. And look, I get it. The first word that jumps into your mind is probably overpopulated. But I'm here to tell you that word doesn't even come close to telling the real story here.
Okay, let's start by looking at the usual suspects. Whenever we try to solve this population puzzle, a few common ideas always get thrown around.
You've heard them all before, I'm sure. People will say it's because of low education levels, or poverty, or this idea that poor families need more kids just to have more earning hands. And, very often, the finger gets pointed at a couple of specific states up in the north. And to be fair, the numbers there are absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, if you just took two states, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, and made them their own country, their combined population of 370 million people would make them the third biggest country in the world. But here's the thing. Just blaming the people who live there, that's missing the real story, the much, much bigger picture.
Because the true answer, the deep, fundamental reason for all of this, it isn't really about social stuff or government policy. No, it's about something way more powerful, something totally beyond human control that has been shaping this part of the world for millions of years. It's all about geography.
And this is where things get really interesting. This is where the land itself gives us the answer.
Okay, meet the main character of our entire story, the Indo-Gangetic Plain. Now, this is not just some random piece of land. We're talking about a massive, continuous stretch of some of the most fertile soil on planet Earth. It is, quite literally, the cradle of Indian civilization. And just look at the sheer size of this thing. At 700,000 square kilometers, the Indo-Gangetic Plain absolutely dwarfs other famous fertile cradles of civilization. It's almost twice as big as the North China Plain. And get this, it's more than 20 times larger than the entire fertile Nile Valley. This isn't just big, folks. This is a geographical superpower.
So how did it get this way? Well, for millions and millions of years, you've had these massive rivers flowing down from the Himalayas, the tallest mountains in the world. And as they flow, they grind down rock into the superfine, nutrient-packed silt. Geologists call it alluvium. They've just been dumping layer after layer of it across this huge area. They literally built an agricultural paradise from scratch. And all of this incredible geography gave the region what you could almost call an unfair advantage in the grand story of human history. It's like a perfect trifecta, a triple benefit. So first, you've got that ridiculously fertile soil we just talked about. Second, a double whammy of water. You have rivers fed year-round by melting Himalayan glaciers, plus the famous annual monsoon rains. And third, those same Himalayan mountains act like a giant wall, blocking all that freezing cold air from Central Asia. It creates this perfect, stable climate for growing tons of food. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This is not some new discovery. Over 2,300 years ago, a Greek ambassador to India named Megasthenes saw this with his own eyes. He wrote, and I'm quoting here, that India had 2 harvests a year, and that famine was basically unheard of. This land was always destined to support a huge number of people. Okay, but that brings up a really good question. If India's geography is so perfect, then why did China's population pull ahead for a big chunk of modern history? Well, that part of the story, that was a completely man-made anomaly. Right? It's the question you're probably thinking. If India was so blessed, what happened? Why did China pull ahead? Well, here's the twist. The answer isn't that China's population suddenly boomed. It's that India's population was artificially and tragically pushed down. Just look at the history. For almost 2,000 years, India consistently had a bigger slice of the world's population pie than China. Back in 1 AD, almost 1 out of every 3 people on the entire planet lived in India. But then, you see it right there, that sharp, dramatic dip starting around the 18th century. That's our anomaly. That's what we need to explain.
And the reason for that dip is heartbreaking. It was a series of absolutely devastating man-made famines that happened under British colonial rule. These weren't caused by the weather or crop failures. They were caused by brutal exploitative policies. We're talking an estimated 30 to 35 million people who died. To put that in perspective, that's 4 times the death toll of the entire First World War.
So you see, that period wasn't a failure of the land. It was a brutal, historical interruption of a pattern that had held for millennia. The geography didn't fail, human policy did. And as soon as India gained its independence, the population began to recover, getting back on the track that its geography had always laid out for it. Okay, so that brings us to today, because the story of India's population is changing yet again. And that ancient geographical blessing that created everything we've talked about, it is now facing a threat like never before.
And this is maybe the most important fact for understanding India today. That whole story about runaway population growth, it's completely out of date. With better education, better healthcare, especially for women, India's fertility rate has dropped to 1.9. Now, for a population to stay stable, you need a rate of 2.1. So India is now below the replacement level. Its population is naturally stabilizing and will soon begin to decline.
So we have to reframe this entire conversation. The core issue has never been that India is overpopulated. The reality is that India is, and always has been, geographically blessed to support a huge population. It's a feature of the land, not a bug in its society. But here's the final, crucial twist. That blessing is now a terrifying double-edged sword. The very things that gave this land its strength, the fertile plains, the mighty rivers, the life-giving monsoons, are now under so much stress that they're threatening to become a curse.
And this is the challenge of the 21st century. Those Himalayan glaciers that feed the rivers, they've been melting 65% faster just since 2010. The monsoon rains are becoming wild and unpredictable. The groundwater is being sucked dry. The entire system that has sustained hundreds of millions of people for thousands of years, it's starting to break down.
So we end up right back where we started, but with a new question. The ancient geographical gift that explains everything about India's population is now in serious danger. And the defining challenge for India's future isn't about controlling its population anymore. It's about whether it can save the very natural blessing that made it all possible in the first place.